Hi everybody. You finished G-1, Pythagorean theorem, working with right triangles. One of the basic skills that we need to be able to do with radicals, answers in radical form, would be to simplify them. Because you did a lot of work with your Pythagorean theorem and you got answers like the square root of 64. And then you just clicked it into the calculator and got an answer. But we also need to be able to simplify the radicals and leave it in radical form, but we just can't leave it like the square root of 64. So today's topic is simplifying radicals. When given a radical, put it in simplest form. We know from middle school and elementary school that if you have a fraction, 2/4, that's not in simplest form, and we need to be able to simplify that to a half. So what I want you to take down for notes, and you have areas like this on your notes paper, is we know 8 squared with our exponents will give us 64. We know that. We also know that the square root of 64 is 8. So it's kind of reverse thought process there. That the square root of 64, what number times itself, will give us that number of 64. And that's this idea of a root or a radical. And so this is often called a radical sign. Okay? So when you hear me say or somebody say radical sign, that's what we're talking about, that specific sign, or the root. Root sign, some teachers call it, a teacher in school that called it a root sign. So there we go. The next thing we have to talk about are our perfect roots. Meaning, if we have the square root of 1, we get 1. Square root of 4 is 2, square root of 9 is 3, and so on. So we've really counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 by roots. And these numbers are important, you guys. The 4, the 9, the 16, they're going to be really important, as you see from my next set of work. Okay, so that's why I'm going to keep these up here. But this is our basics of roots, and these are our perfect roots right here. So the first thing we're going to do is this. If I give you the square root of 12, simplify it. What you used to do was punch in your radical sign, then 12, and you get an answer of 3.4 or 3.5 on that. We're not going to do that in this assignment today. We're going to learn a different skill today. So to simplify that, we've got to take 12 and break it down. Forget the 1 really for now, because we're dealing with ones. But 4, 9, 16. Do those numbers go into 12? The 4, the 9, and the 16. And the 4 does. So that we end up with the square root of 4 times the square root of 3. 4 times 3 is 12. So we're taking this and we're breaking it down a little bit. Why are we doing that? Because the square root of 4 is a perfect square. The square root of 4 is 2. So this becomes 2. And this is the leap that we're making. This is the essence of the skill that we're doing for today. The square root of 4 is 2 times the square root of 3. And that is your answer. What you've done is simplify this to that. And so if I say simplify this, you bring it to this by breaking it down using your perfect roots. Let's try another one. Square root of 32. So what goes in? 4, 9, yeah, 4 does. Square root of 4 times the square root of 8. Square root of 4 becomes 2 times the square root of 8. Here's the issue though, we're not done. Because this is not simple. 4 still goes into the 8. So we have to keep going. Keep the 2, and the square root of 8 becomes the square root of 4 times the square root of 2. So now we have 2 times 2, because the square root of 4 is 2, times the square root of 2, 4 times the square root of 2. I'm going to write that right there, because if you realize that 16 goes into 32, you could have made your life a lot easier. The square root of 16 times the square root of 2. 2 times 16 is 32. What's the square root of 16? 4 times the square root of 2. So you got the same answer, just although this is a much more efficient way to do it. So hopefully you can recognize those shortcuts, or the larger of the numbers that go in, the factors. All right, so next one. What if I give you this? Multiply. Multiply those two things together. Square root of 3 times the square root of 6 is the square root of 18. Well, the square root, what goes into 18? 4 doesn't. 9 does. So it's the square root of 9 times the square root of 2. 9 times 2 is 18. Square root of, and that's your answer right there. How about square root of 15? Square root of 3 times the square root of 5. You can't simplify any of those. So guess what? This is in simplest form. Sometimes that's what happens. They're already in simplest form. You can't reduce that anymore. Square root of 30. 4 doesn't go into 30. 9 doesn't go into 30. 16 doesn't go in. 25 doesn't. It's in simplest form. All right. So those are some of the basics so far. I got one more thing we need to do. We need to divide. I just showed you multiplication. Let's divide. And really what we're doing is simplifying a fraction. The rule is no radical in denominator. Okay? If you need to pause and write that down, write it down. It'll be on your note sheet where to write it. You can't have a radical in the denominator. So what that means is, how do we get rid of that? Well, we multiply it by 1. How do you multiply it by 1? Multiply it by the same thing. Multiply it by what you have in the denominator. And I'm about to teach you one more thing I'm not sure you recognize with radical signs. This over this is 1, so we're not changing this around anyway. We're simplifying it. So we have 3 times the square root of 6. Here's the real important aspect. Square root of 6 times the square root of 6 is 6. Okay, it's kind of the reverse of this up here. So we have this, and this simplifies. 3 over 6 is 1/2. And there is our answer. Square root of 6 over 2. So there's our division type problem.